It's about sustainable freedom. I think there are loads of opportunities to demonstrate your value. It's entirely contingent on your ability to build trust with your client. Everyone at the moment, particularly if you're trying to get into law or progress within law, feels like they suddenly have to be a crypto expert or an AI expert in order to progress. Don't worry about that. You have to engage with it. You're not expected to be an expert in anything. One of the best qualities of lawyers is that we know who to ask rather than knowing all the answers ourselves.
On today's Legally Speaking podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by Leanne Wright. Leanne is a partner in the private equity team at Osborne Clarke. She focuses on advising founders and management teams on private equity transactions. Leanne was previously an associate at Mishcon de Rare, associate at Eversheds, and solicitor at Geldards. She was the chair and vice chair of the Junior Lawyers Division for the Law Society. Leanne is an advocate for equality, diversity, and inclusion in the legal profession. She is also passionate about supporting and promoting women founders as the world of work and business strives towards creating a better future for all of us. So, a very warm welcome to the show, Leanne.
Thank you, Rob. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And before we dive into all your amazing experiences to date, we do have a customary icebreaker question here on the Legally Speaking podcast, which is, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very real, what would you rate the hit TV series Suits in terms of its reality of the law, if you've seen it?
Rob, I have seen every single episode of Suits.
Wow.
It's a hugely entertaining show, but I'm going to give it a solid 2. Whilst some of the characters are certainly caricatures of people I've met during my career, I really struggle with the levels of dishonesty and manipulation demonstrated by the lawyers. It's not reflective of the vast majority of lawyers. And also, I've never, ever seen a company bought or sold through a single piece of paper.
Who knows in 100 years' time whether that may or may not be a thing. But I think given that you have extensively watched the show, your 2 is justified, and we can move very swiftly on to talk all about you. So to begin with, Leanne, would you mind telling our listeners a bit about your background and career journey?
Of course. So I am now a partner in the private equity team at Osborne Clarke, but I've worked at 5 very different law firms throughout my career. My first ever career aspiration was princess, but by the time I was about 9 or 10, I'd pivoted away from that and committed to becoming a lawyer. And by the time I was a teenager, I was determined to be a big city corporate lawyer. My plans did become derailed a bit while I was at university in London, alas. Don't worry, this isn't going to turn into a reality TV style sob story, but I do think it's relevant to how I ended up here. So I'm going to share it with you. Yep. While I was at university, I was trapped in an abusive relationship. I was scared, I was lonely, and for the first time in my entire life, I was struggling academically. I needed to go home. So I got a training contract at a lovely high street firm back in Lincolnshire, where I'm from, so I could move back in with my parents and be safe and supported while I came back to life.
Yeah.
I then got a newly qualified role in a corporate team at a firm in Nottingham called Geldards, and I actually transferred the last 3 months of my training contract to that firm. After a while, I was approached by Eversheds, and spent a short time in their Nottingham office in their corporate team. And then I moved back to London and spent a few years at Mishcon de Rare. I moved to Osborne Clarke as a senior associate in May 2021. 18 months later, I was promoted to associate director, and just over a year after that, I was promoted again to partner.
Incredible. And if our listeners wanted to know why we were so keen to get Leanne on the show today, I think she's very much justified that. What a incredible career progression. But, of course, there's some difficult adversities you've had to go through at the start of your journey. And we thank you for being refreshingly open and honest about that and authentic in what you share. But let's pick out some of the lessons along the way, because as you said, you have worked in different law firms. So can I take you back to your high street law firm days, where you started? Could you tell us a bit about your time there and what was your experience like and what you felt you got equipped from there that helped you move forward?
Yes, it was wonderful. It was fantastic experience. I obviously wasn't doing the law that I wanted to do. But one of the things you do in a high street firm is you really understand the breadth of knowledge required to be a great lawyer. You are dealing with the man on the street that comes in with their second-hand car dispute and their park home sale and their defamation case from what someone said on Facebook, and you're serving the local community. And so what I really learned was how to be helpful, even if you can't help. Because, what you're trying to do is give people warm feelings about the firm because they might come back, even if actually it's not a goer from a business perspective. And of course, what you're doing as well is really understanding what commercial awareness is. And it's a massive buzzword for very junior lawyers. But, what I was doing was helping my local community, but I was also vetting the clients for the firm, to be really cynical about it. Yeah. What I was doing as the sort of free half hour for the local community is seeing whether or not, can this person pay? Do they have something they can actually instruct us on? Is this whether or not it's going to be a big money maker? Does it help strategically for the firm to be instructed? And therefore, should I pass this to a proper lawyer to actually look at, or should I be as helpful as I can and respectfully, send the person on their way feeling like they've just had a bit of sensible advice and someone to listen to?
Yeah, I love that. You talked about serving. I always, and I've been in the sales world, and some people, say that can be a bit of a dirty word. And I think, no, actually done professionally, sales is serving. And, similarly to like where you're talking about from your legal days and community, it's a lot of things we're super passionate about here on the show. And why we do the show is to try and inspire and inform those in and around the legal community. But you've moved on, and, you mentioned you'd moved various firms. I want to talk about some of the maybe obstacles you might have faced with trying to move firms as you've progressed. Obviously now your partner Osborne Clarke, it's fantastic, but everyone has a story and maybe some challenges along the way. So what were some of the obstacles you maybe came across from maybe moving to likes of Eversheds, Mishcon, and then ultimately Osborne Clarke? Is there anything you can share from that perspective?
Well, I think the first one was I'd never done a proper corporate deal, and I was applying for a corporate newly qualified role. And the way I did that was the high street firm did do small corporate transactions, but I needed to pass a competency interview. And in the days of actual physical corporate Bibles, I went in on the weekend. And I read all of the corporate Bibles on the shelf of the one corporate lawyer in the firm, and went in on a Monday morning with all of my questions, so that I could demonstrate. And you don't need a huge amount of knowledge to demonstrate passion, but you need some. And I knew I wanted to do it. So I guess that was the first one. The second is when you move firms, you really appreciate the importance of internal goodwill, because every time you move business, it's the biggest gamble, I think, when you move firms is the loss of internal goodwill. And so each time you move, if you are going to move, I think you really need to have a plan for how you are going to build that up again. And unfortunately, there's no magic to it. Sometimes that plan has to involve working harder than everyone else in the team to prove yourself. Yeah. And you should be prepared. You should be prepared for that when you move. And I think sometimes people underestimate that when they move firms, and everything that is great about you is forgotten. That being said, moving firms is a really good opportunity to build a new personal brand within that firm, particularly if you're trying to sort of get promoted sideways. You sort of automatically have a degree of credibility when you move in. And so in that sense, it's easier sometimes if you get promoted sideways because you're already a senior associate when you go in, for example, and you're not someone's former trainee.
Yeah, no, really good lessons in there. And I love going back to that sort of first move, not necessarily having the experience, but the passion and actually daring to try. And, I encourage people all the time, passion, if you're really passionate about something and you just get in the room, then you're giving yourself the opportunity. But I love the fact that you just went for it. And I think that's a really good message in there because look where you are now. And I guess let's fast forward to today, partner at Osborne Clarke. I'm a big fan of the firm. I've had the privilege of working with the firm over the years as well. So you sit in the private equity team and we have listeners of all stages of the career, starting out those very much, the latter stages. But can you take us back to maybe helping people out who maybe less informed about the world of private equity? What is it and what are some of the type of work you're involved with?
Sure. So it's a fairly broad church, but private equity is essentially private equity transactions are essentially the sale and purchase of businesses to a private investor. And what I mean by that is we're not sort of doing what we call a trade sale, so where you get bought out by a competitor, those kind of mergers. We're talking about somebody that invests in a company for 3 to 5 years. They're trying to get 3 to 5 times return. So what you've got is this sort of conveyor belt of M&A transactions, people coming in and making money, helping to guide the business, helping to really push business growth. That's what private equity is. And so all private equity transactional lawyers are corporate lawyers. You start out as an M&A lawyer because there's always a sale and purchase in the course of the transaction. Now, most private equity lawyers have what we call a sponsor-focused practice. A sponsor is a private equity investor. Most private equity lawyers have a sponsor-focused practice or a mixed practice, where they do a mix of acting for the sponsor on some transactions and acting for the management team, the people working in the business, on others. So the downside of doing a private equity transaction, if you're a founder, is that you don't get to run off into the sunset with all of your money. You have to stay in the business and drive the growth. Private equity investors don't know how to run businesses. They do know how to grow them. So the management team is what the private equity investor is investing in. I'm different to many other private equity lawyers because a few years ago, I decided to only have a management-focused private equity practice. I don't act for, my firm has a sponsor practice, but I don't act for any private equity houses. I act for the CEO, the CFO, the key leadership team of the business that is receiving investment.
Yep, I think you articulated that fantastically. So thank you for breaking that down for us. So you've kind of explained it. Let's get into your world then. What would you mind sharing what a typical day looks like for you as a partner? And also, how did you find that transition or the promotion from being sort of senior associate to partner?
So the first one, a typical day, it's a cliche, Rob, but there's no such thing.
Yeah.
I think from a work perspective, I try and the first thing I do is find out what on earth happened overnight, because there's always something. From a work perspective, what I'm trying to do is check in with my team, make sure that they know what they're supposed to be doing, keep them updated. I spend a lot of time, because my clients are individuals, rather than companies. I don't talk to general counsel. I talk to the CEO. I spend a lot of time on the phone to my clients, continuing to build that relationship, continuing to build their trust. Very rarely talking about law, mostly talking about what they're worried about that day, which may or may not be related to the transaction. But it's one of the reasons I do what I do. I really admire people that run their own businesses. I think they're incredibly brave and capable people. But I also think being a CEO is a really lonely job. Yeah. And when you're doing a private equity transaction, you're doing so much stakeholder management. Sometimes you just need somebody you trust to talk to about that awkward board meeting you had or whatever. So I spend a lot of my time doing that. As a partner, there's obviously the usual. There's always internal relationship building to be doing. There's always internal meetings and management related stuff, lots of people related stuff, lots of reflection about strategy and how I'm contributing to that, both at a sort of firm wide level, a team level, a people level. Because one of the things I've noticed the most since becoming a partner is that there's no immediate feedback loop as to whether or not you've had a good day.
Yeah.
You know, when you're a fee earner, you do your documents, you do your list of what people have told you to do, and you put your hours down and you go, great, thank you very much, smashed it today. When you're a partner, because you're one step removed from the detail a lot of the time, and so much of what you do is in the longer term, is about relationships. You can have 4 conversations in a day that may or may not bear fruit in 2 years' time. But what you don't have is, I did a really great job today. You have to do that yourself and reflect and really think about it to decide whether or not you've done well today, to give yourself that sort of pat on the head.
Today's episode is brought to you by Clio. Are you frustrated with your current legal management software? You're not alone, and thousands of solicitors across the UK feel your pain. However, the hassle of moving all their existing client and case data holds most back from switching, prolonging the frustration. Clio is here to help. Their dedicated migrations team will be with you every step of the way while you transfer your information. And if you have any questions, you'll get award-winning support available 24/5 by live chat, phone, and email. So help is always there when you need it most. It's no wonder Clio consistently receives 5-star ratings for its ease of use and top-notch service. If you're ready to leave the frustration behind, visit clio.com/UK to learn more and see why Clio continues to be the go-to choice for solicitors across the UK. Now back to the show. You have to be sort of your own biggest cheerleader, don't you? But one thing I'm definitely gleaming from this discussion, and it's very evident why you've done so well throughout your career and are thriving, is relationships matter to you. So I always say contact's good, but relationships pay. And you gave the examples of the CEO. You know, you're not the lawyer. You're becoming a trusted advisor. You're consulting. You know, you're genuinely there. You're taking an interest. You're trying to help them problem solve. You know, feel open and, you know, willing to share important information with you. And I think that only comes from fostering deep-rooted, genuine professional working relationships. And as you talk about sort of that internal goodwill and sort of really going a step further. So I think if you're listening to this, take real sort of grit from the fact that, you know, relationships do pay. And what Leanne's done throughout her career and why she's thriving is because they generally are really important to you. And as a result of that, you're seeing all the fruits of fostering those relationships. Let's get into gender dynamics in private equity, something I know you're quite keen to sort of share your views on. What are the unique hurdles in your view for women in private equity law, and how do internal initiatives at Osborne Clarke address to pave the way forward?
Yes, so I do not want to dismiss first of all, I don't want to dismiss the struggles of women in other areas of law, Rob.
Yeah.
In private equity, I think the unique challenges are, first of all, there really are many fewer compared to some other areas of law. The way you build your practice and the business development, the way the work comes in is unique. A lot of the work comes from other advisors. So not only do you struggle with the lack of diversity within your own profession, you're also contingent on tax advisors, investment bankers, corporate finance houses, and most of the time they're making the referrals and the introductions. And so from a business development perspective, you know, it's really difficult to build those relationships. It's hard enough to do it with other lawyers that you have a bit in common with, but trying to persuade an investment banker to give you an opportunity to pitch is extremely difficult, because their diversity stats, trust me, are much worse than ours. And so I think that's really difficult. And so it's really hard to see how on earth am I ever going to build a practice to get to partnership when I'm so reliant on the old boys network. And I think because of that, some of the really well-meaning advice that you get to do that doesn't actually help you when you're a woman, and is sort of done from the lens of how the blokes have done it. And well done them. It's really hard for anybody to build their own client base and to build a business case for partnership. But there's a pattern that you can follow if you're a man that you can't necessarily follow if you're a woman.
Yeah, no, and again, thank you for sharing, real life experiences and what you've seen as well. It's only going to help hopefully push for change. And we champion, one of our missions is to make a kinder, more collaborative, inclusive, innovative legal community. I guess let's switch now to technology. We can't really sort of ignore or bury our heads in the sand, and specifically sort of automation within the practice of law. Tech is evolving. We know that. How do you envision robotics or automation shifting legal practices, especially in the field of your world as sort of nuanced as private equity?
I'm super excited, Rob. I think the whole thing's exciting. Look, when I was a trainee, I became vice chair of the junior lawyers division of the Law Society, and I got to meet with the Lord Chief Justice at that time, and he told me solicitors were going to be replaced by robots. And he told me that, a decade ago. And here we still are. And now I don't have to go to a physical data room or read a physical Bible, which is wonderful. And so I'm really excited. I think tech is a fantastic enabler. I think that everybody needs to be engaging with what's happening. And actually, that's not limited to tech. Good lawyers know what's going on in the world around them. Our clients are using stuff. We're using stuff. Osborne Clarke, we have OC GPT, and varies. We have an OC solutions team that's building software to help our clients do bolt-on transactions and therefore minimize some of the process and make doing lots of little corporate acquisitions cheaper. It's a game-changing enabler for our practice. And I don't think we should be afraid of that. I think we should be excited by it. I've never thought that my value was in drafting board minutes. My value is that I help my clients sleep at night, because I tell them what to worry about and what not to worry about. And, and as we've already discussed, I help them through that awkward conversation they need to have. Our clients, they trust us. They tell us their hopes and dreams. They tell us their aspirations. They tell us what they're frightened of. And I don't think that a robot is ever going to replace that. And so if I could spend less of my time doing the process and more of my time helping my clients sleep at night, I think that's a real win. I think for those that are sort of fearful and worried about it, and I know that everyone at the moment, particularly if you're trying to get into law or progress within law, feels like they suddenly have to be a crypto expert or an AI expert in order to progress, to demonstrate that they're with the times. Don't worry about that. You have to engage with it. You're not expected to be an expert in anything. One of the best qualities of lawyers is that we know who to ask rather than knowing all the answers ourselves.
And it's so true, isn't it? And that's the power of a network. And I talk a lot about that as well. Who do you know who can help you with things in terms of getting that specific expertise, whatever it might be. I think what you're referring to there is something that we really kind of double down on here on the show is having that human focus in the law, even though we're going through a tech revolution, which, I welcome. Hopefully it saves hours of time for people combined over years. And actually there has knock-on effects in terms of, your well-being and, not necessarily having to work quite so hard to sort of redraft and do all these things, use these tools for better good. But I think given your support for transformative business leaders, you work with some really interesting clients. What challenges and opportunities do you see in maintaining a sort of human-centered approach within the high-stakes world of corporate law?
The opportunities are actually giving people a bit of relief from the tech and giving people that sort of sense check, that confirmation that the decisions that they're making are the right ones. I think mostly, we give people confidence that they're making the right decision, particularly when you're a transactional lawyer. And so I think there are loads of opportunities to demonstrate your value. It's entirely contingent on your ability to build trust with your client. Opportunities wise, I'm really excited about the prospect of the billable hours model going. I think it's probably here to stay in some things, but from a transaction perspective, I think that actually, if we get rid of the billable hours model, then it enables us to demonstrate our value to our clients, because an hour of my time has never been what I've given. You're not paying for an hour of my time. You're paying for every conversation I've ever had with a CEO when you talk to me. You're paying for the years of training. You're paying for all the personal development. You're paying for how much time I've invested in my management of people within my team so that they are effective at doing their job. And if we stop focusing on what an hour of our time is worth, then we can move to a value-based pricing model for transactions rather than a time-based one. And so I'm super excited about that, because our value is in us as humans, not in the time we spend on documents.
Absolutely. And price is what you pay, value is what you get. And we should probably give a shout out to Sean Jardine, who has also been on the Legally Speaking podcast, yes, who advocates very strongly for value-based pricing and has some great content if you want to look more into that. He's very much an expert around that. And, I agree. I think moving to that model is only a good thing for lawyers and for clients, and will help with transparency and so much more. Let's talk more about equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I know it is something you are passionate about and you advocate for within the legal profession. But if you could change one thing about the legal industry to make it more inclusive, what would it be and why?
I think there's a lot of virtue signalling. And I think there's a lot of people being afraid to be honest about challenges and be honest about their own experience and to confront themselves in terms of their part in not being inclusive. And I think that the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion has become diluted by nice words rather than the kindness of being really frank about people's experiences and the challenges. And we're watering down the message by signalling left, right, and centre to how much everyone cares. And people do care, actually. People care a lot more than they think, but it comes across as inauthentic when there are so many nice words about it that people are failing to face the harsh reality. And what happens there is that you end up with the first possible outcome is people put their fingers in their ears and they feel helpless and they feel like they can't do anything about it. So what's the point? And we lead to despair. And the other outcome is that people get so ranty and angry about things that they can't hear anything else. One thing I have found really powerful is reverse mentoring. So Osborne Clarke has a reverse mentoring program, and it was the first thing I did. Well, I was really excited when I became a partner. I could do the reverse mentoring and be mentored by somebody, and I've done a great deal of work in trying to help women in the legal profession and my clients. But it's been pointed out to me that feminism was actually a white middle class movement. And we've sort of got to our point where gender seems to be the gateway drug to diversity. But what that's led to is this weird diversity hierarchy that's unwritten that everyone seems to feel. And so I was really keen that when I talk about women, I didn't mean women like me. I didn't mean white women. And so I joined the reverse mentoring program, and I have been mentored by a junior woman of colour in my firm about her experiences. And it was unbelievably powerful, the patience that she demonstrated with me whilst this clumsy white woman tries to ask all of her questions in a way that isn't racist. And it was really powerful, and it was really amazing. And I think that everybody in a position of seniority should do something like that.
Yeah,
that was a long answer, Rob. I apologise.
Not at all. It was an important answer. It was thought out, and that's why we're bringing leaders of the profession like yourself on to share your thoughts, share your solutions. I'm a big advocate for reverse mentoring. I think it's fantastic. I always talk about having your 360 board of directors, someone ahead of you, someone on the same level of you, someone beneath you, and getting a real view of life. So no, very, very grateful for your well-measured response. Like to switch up a little bit and talk about your trustee work of the Sophie Hayes Foundation. So you are, as I say, a trustee there, a charity that supports women survivors of modern slavery. Could you tell us more about the foundation and your role within it?
Yes, so I've recently stepped down from that role. Because I timed out. One of the first things I did was I changed the constitutional documents so that trustees had to step down after a certain period. Because particularly with voluntary roles, it's a principle of good governance that you need to recycle your leadership. And so it was really important that you continue to get new trustees and fresh ideas rather than people sitting on it until the end of time, which is, it's just not good governance to do that. So I forced myself out by changing the constitutional documents, and my time came to an end. I joined. I care really passionately about the cause. The cynical answer is I joined as a trustee because I wanted board experience, both to help my own career, my own leadership skills, and also to understand my clients better. Because I'd never sat on a board, and so I was trying to pick somewhere where I could make a real difference at a strategic level. I was never going to do the bake sale to raise money and stuff, but I wanted to join somewhere where they really needed me, and they really needed a lawyer on the board just to give them that a bit of perspective, tell them when they need legal advice, tell them most importantly when they don't need legal advice, which sometimes as a lawyer is the best advice you can give. And it was really amazing. The charity supports women survivors of human trafficking that have been trafficked to or within the UK. There are hundreds of women, as we speak, living in safe houses, and you don't get a great deal of government support. So the whole concept of the charity is that it's about sustainable freedom, about shaping your own destiny. And it was about giving these women the tools to build a career, to build a sustainable, independent life so that they don't end up back in the cycle of trafficking and forced labour, so that they can build their own lives, have that sort of self-determinism, and really take control, and giving them the skills that they need in order to do that.
Yeah, it's an incredible role. I mean, you've just done so many amazing things, and thank you again for sharing your outlook on that as well from a personal and professional development perspective. Just want to ask before we look to wrap up. You mentioned briefly you were the chair and vice chair of the Junior Lawyers Division. Tell us about what any of those experiences influenced your perspective as a leader in the legal field today, or anything you would share from your time there that was beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I really care about being a lawyer. I really care about the profession. And so I did it because I wanted to engage with my profession. You talk to a lot of lawyers in different firms, in different organizations, including in-house. And you really get a steer of what's good and what isn't good. The more lawyers you talk to, the more frank conversations you have, you really get a bit of perspective in terms of what's going on in the profession, other people's experiences. It's very easy sometimes, because being a lawyer is such a difficult job. Sometimes it's very easy to go, is that everywhere, or is that just here? Is that me, or is that everything else? And so, talking to other lawyers really gives you kind of that perspective. I was also there at a really interesting time, just as the SRA were starting to moot the idea of the SQE. And the first proposal was rubbish, frankly. And so I actually I did a public debate with the chair of education and training at the SRA about the SQE proposal as it was then. It's much better now. It's a much better system now. But, a huge number of stakeholders campaigned against and around that. So I think it was a really good thing to do. And I would actually encourage, I know when you're trying to build your career, talking to other lawyers feels like a bit of a waste of time because they're never going to give you work. Actually, I do get work from other lawyers, and also being engaged and understanding what's going on in your profession, I think is really important. So no, you don't have to, be really active within the law society, but do talk to other lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you're a fantastic networker. I've talked about the value of the relationships that you pride yourself on, and I think has been key to your success, or one of the keys for sure. A last question before we wrap up. What advice would you give for aspiring lawyers where we are today, who want to sort of, mirror what you've been able to do in terms of fast track career progression, get involved with all these things, have amazing clients, go back to sort of at the start of your journey? What advice would you give for those entering the profession today that would help them or set them in good stead?
Sure. I think, firstly, if you can't see positive role models, know that you can learn just as much from negative ones. If there are people that you don't want to be like and people that aren't like you can still learn from them. So instead of dismissing them as not relevant, or sometimes just thinking they're a bad person, figure out what it is about their behavior that makes you feel a particular way about them, that makes them relatable or not relatable to you. And how you might act in their shoes. The second thing is, we've already talked about it, Rob, but relationships. And be really careful about all of your relationships, personal and professional. Curate them often and ensure that your relationships are co-elevating. There's nothing wrong with kind of in your own mind going, thank you, I wish you well on your journey, and getting rid of some of your relationships because they're no longer where they need to be. I think that we go right back to the beginning about passion. Be authentically passionate. When I'm looking at applications for people who want to work at Osborne Clarke, don't pretend to care about something you don't. Do tell me about the mad thing that you do care about, because I am desperate to work with the person that's enthusiastic about the history of how paper is created. I want to work with that person. I don't want to work with the person that's indifferent and apathetic and doesn't act like they care. So do care about things. And the final one, and very closely linked to my own story, but really important to me. If you choose to share your life with someone, make it someone who helps you maintain perspective through their patience and kindness, because sometimes the world will not end if you pause to have dinner with your loved ones. And someone who understands that yes, they do come first overall, but sometimes in the moment they can't.
Yeah, I think powerful words, and so true. And again, thank you for really strong reflections there. I think the one thing you say about sort of, role models and maybe some of the negatives of those roles, it's so true, isn't it? It's like, success doesn't really teach you a lot, it's the failings. And I think along the way, like you say, if you see those, it's like, okay, well, I would definitely approach this differently. So I really like that insight, so thanks for sharing that. This has been an absolute masterclass, Leanne. Really enjoyed learning about your story, everything you've been sharing, everything you're doing. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm sure our listeners will too. So if for those want to know more about you, your career, or indeed Osborne Clarke, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites or any social media handles. We'll also include them in this episode for you too.
So you can Google Osborne Clarke. You'll also notice our roll on Friday score is pretty high. I am on X, but I use it mostly for complaining. And since the algorithm has changed due to the change of hands, I find it quite negative. I do check LinkedIn every single day. So that's the best place to find me and talk to me.
There we go, folks. Well, it just leaves me to say thanks ever so much once again, Leanne. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. So from all of us on the Legally Speak podcast, sponsored by Clio, wishing you lots of continued success with your phenomenal career and future pursuits. But for now, over and out. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. If you like the content here, why not check out our world-leading content and collaboration hub, the Legally Speaking Club, over on Discord. Go to our website, www.legallyspeakingpodcast.com, for the link to join our community there. Over and out. Hey listeners, we're super excited to share a brand new way for you to connect with the Legally Speaking podcast. Introducing Fan Mail. Got questions about a recent episode, thoughts on legal careers, or just want to share some super positive feedback with us? Simply click the send us a text link in the show notes and your message will come straight to us. We can't wait to hear from our amazing legal community. Thank you so much for all your support from all of us here at the team. We really appreciate it.